Hello, and welcome to Work Well with Stephanie Wolfe, brought to you by the Whole Food Health Coach LLC, where we make your goals our goals, and you're never alone on your wellness journey. Experience the information, inspiration, and collaboration of our Coach in Your Corner partnership. My name is Stephanie Wolfe. I'm a national board-certified health and wellness coach and proud owner of the Whole Food Health Coach, now in its 9th year, and 5-time winner of the Best of Gwinnett Award of Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Metabolism Practices. Rachel, Sherry, and I invite you to visit WholeFoodHealthCoach.com to set up your 60-minute healthy living assessment. Work Well is dedicated to your personal and professional health and wellness. I offer examples from my own life, health, marriage, family, and business. I share my research, my opinion, and my faith, designed to bring you compelling content, engaging challenges, and practical body, soul, and spirit support on your wellness journey. Work Well comes to you from my personal desire to live long and strong with passion and purpose, die of old age, and help others to do the same. Together in partnership with Dr. Catherine Wigman of Georgia MD Direct. The Direct Primary Care Clinic is located in Suwanee, Georgia. Dr. Catherine operates on a monthly membership fee and does not take insurance. Members like me have a phone number to reach their primary care provider directly at any time. So from living rooms to boardrooms, here on Gwinnett Business RadioX, you're listening to Work Well with Stephanie Wolfe. All right, let's do this. I have a funny story to start us off with. It's called A Pastor's Power. A pastor was in the middle of his sermon when he noticed a man had fallen asleep with his head on his wife's shoulder. "Ma'am, wake your husband up," the pastor snapped. The wife smiled and replied, "You put him to sleep. You wake him up." Oh, I'm sorry about that. All right. Well, I like to make you laugh. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that every week I seek to offer you some information and inspiration, make you smile a little bit. I like to encourage you to challenge yourself, change something, improve something, let go of something, pick up something, start something, or restart something. We've been a lot of direction all year, and I can't believe it's October already, but this month is all about relationships. And last week we did Daddy's Girls. So we talked about our relationship with our parents, our father in specific. And then today, in honor of Pastor's Appreciation Day, which is coming up this Sunday, with my favorite pastor, my husband, Jack Wolfe, for what I'm calling the Pastoral Perspective. Hi, Jack. Welcome.
Well, hey there. Good afternoon, I guess it is. Thanks for having me on, hon. I appreciate it.
Oh, I always love having you, and everybody loves you. They actually love you a little more than me.
We'll see how it goes today.
Okay. See if we still love each other at the end of the podcast.
We'll love
today.
each other. I don't know if they'll be impressed with me or not. We'll see.
Well, I think I'm always impressed with you, so I'm sure they will be. All right, so we wore our Healthy Living Revolution shirts today, and most everyone who's been listening to me knows that I have a clean mission. I have a whole series called Clean Concepts, and I'm doing lots of different pieces with that. But the CLEAN acronym actually stands for character, how you care about yourself. And that's kind of the core values that drive you and help you to make decisions throughout your life. And the actions and behavior that we experience or that we choose actually are driven and fueled by our core values. So we're going to be leaning in a little bit to that more today. And then lifestyle, how we live out those things that we say we believe. So we are going to go a lot of different directions today, in keeping, again, with the clean concepts, character, how you care, your core values, lifestyle, how you live, and living out those things you say you believe, exercise, how you move, and attitude, how you think, as well as nutrition, how you eat. Today, we're going to lean more into the CLA part of the CLEAN acronym with the pastoral perspective from my husband. And we're going to share a little bit about where we've come from. We will be celebrating 50 years of marriage in March of next year, and we've been in ministry over 45 years, if I'm counting, somewhere around there. 1985, I believe, was the year that God promoted my husband to full-time ministry. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, and then what we're doing today. So I'd love to just say, hey, Jack, tell us where you're at today, what you're doing now, or you want to start back where we started in the early days of CCF, that's fine too.
Well, I think that would be great. Why don't you go ahead and kind of roll through our little, because you'll do a better job. I go off on a bunny trail. Give us a little synopsis of episodes that bring us up to where we are currently, and then I'll weigh in here and there as we go. How about that?
All right. See, when I told you he was coming, that he's the boss. So he is my general manager for my company. And so I think that's a good plan. I actually started writing something about our history because part of EPIC and the EPIC Faith Mission or EPIC Faith Vision was all about where our story meets his story or history. And our history is kind of important to how we get where we are. And for all of you who are listening, it's important to you too. I think there are a lot of things we learn from our past and some things that we learn well that we don't want to repeat and other things that are working well for us that we do more of. So Epic Faith is a faith that's so big that it's actually small. That's kind of our mentality, is really not necessarily building big, but building deep and doing something more meaningful and impactful. And so epic is defined as a long poem, typically one derived from ancient oral tradition, narrating the deeds and adventures of heroic and legendary figures or history of a nation. So when I'm thinking about a legendary figure, obviously where our story meets his story, I'm talking about Jesus.
That's right.
And lots of God had happened before I came on the scene in 1958, and you in 1956. So he had been doing just fine without us, probably along the time.
But he needs us.
He needs us, and I love that we're a part of that story. And I think that's what makes all the difference in the world, is the fact that we own that. At least our piece of the story, our piece of the journey.
Sure.
And we've certainly done some good things, and we've done some great things, and we've done some idiotic things and made some missteps along the way. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that. But all of our stories of faith point to his story history.
Yeah.
And that's what makes Epic Faith come alive. That's why originally our church name was Calvary Christian Fellowship, and we were 18 years down on Main Street in Duluth. Still love our Duluth heritage and the legends that lived back then, right?
Great memories there for sure.
So actually 1987 is when the Lord called Jack and me and Jeremy and Chad to move from Auburn, Indiana to Atlanta, Georgia to plant a church. We didn't have anybody here that was calling us except for the Father who had
the Lord.
Really laid on Jack's heart that we were to move. I wasn't convinced at all, but God continued to confirm and affirm things in my heart as well. But simple obedience to the call of God and meager belongings, as well as a $200 in our pocket, is the famous $200 story.
That's right.
And so we just kind of picked up our little family and a small U-Haul and moved down to the Atlanta area and landed in Duluth. And then the Lord helped us to start Calvary Christian Fellowship on Easter Sunday in 1988 in a small rented room at the Marriott Pleasant Hill Road in Duluth, Georgia. So, and then our life just began to grow from there, and our ministry began to grow. Obviously, the church grew and grew and grew, and we were on Main Street, rented the facility, then we bought the facility, then we did a bunch of construction on the facility. A lot of people remember you out there laying brick on that building. And I still remember when Pastor Jack was laying the brick. They always just assumed that, you just were out there for slave, labor, basically.
No, I love doing it too.
Yeah, but you also had, credentials. I mean, it wasn't like you were just, like you say, stacking one on two.
Jesus had credentials too, but he was also a carpenter.
There you go. All right.
So I'm just saying.
Yes, absolutely. And we've pretty much been bivocational almost all of our life. I only remember a very short time of just completely full-time ministry there on Main Street. But the church grew and grew. Like I said, 1,000 members, 3 services on Sunday, 12 staff, a lot of pastors, huge budget, and we had just bought new land and we're ready to build a brand new complex on that land. And then the Lord just changed our focus. I think sometimes, and you can address this too, because of the things that normally that would be the next step.
Normally it would be.
For a church our size, and 3 services on Sunday was pretty exhausting. One of them was in Spanish, so we did not do that service ourselves. We had Spanish. We had Spanish pass. Hola, ¿cómo está? Okay, yes. I'm sorry to butcher the Hispanic languages and insult anyone out there listening. But so in 2005 is kind of when, God really spoke. And what I remember, and I was going back looking at my journals for these things, and in my journal I wrote that God spoke to you, that you can go there if you want to, but I'm not going there. And that still just really tugs on my heartstring a little bit, just because that word alone, I mean, we wouldn't be going where God wasn't sending us.
Right.
Otherwise, we'd still be in Auburn, Indiana. We would never have moved down here.
That's
and met
right.
all the wonderful people that we've met. So, and then, really just kind of started seeking the Lord at that time. It's like, okay, well then now what? Because we had already sold our building in downtown, and we were renting back from them at the time, and we were going to be building the building, and we were working with them to bring the theater, which is now the Red Clay Theater, and the Pure Taqueria, which was our youth and offices and our big sanctuary after the second renovation when we bought it and built on. So anything about that before I move in, because I want to make sure you communicate what you need to communicate along these lines.
Well, just they were wonderful times. I'm sorry, they were wonderful times. They were great, great opportunities for sure. And I think it's easy to kind of think that once you start down a certain road, you're going to continue to go down that road, that direction, that way. This is going to be how it all works out, kind of a deal. And when you were saying that, it reminded me of a time where one of the apostles was swept away out of a crowd to witness to an Ethiopian eunuch, and we have to be careful not to mechanize everything and say this is the way it now always must be, kind of a deal. And if you read the Bible, for crying out loud, that is a book of adventures of people's lives. I mean, from start to finish, there's one twist and turn after another. It's not a book that's edited to make us all feel good. There's some tough stuff in there, some heartbreaking stuff. There's some amazing things in there, but in the midst of it all, we see the Lord, weaving His life, His power, His Spirit through frail human beings that are doing the very best they can to follow Him. Moses, Jonah, Samson. I mean, goodness gracious, they're all doing, and God always shines in the midst of it, and He always gets the glory, and He uses us. And I'll say this in spite of ourselves at times, because we do it as good as we can, and then He uses us, and we always acknowledge Him in that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think those years, we just followed what we thought was the next step.
Right.
And, certainly we were getting a lot of, counsel from people who've been there, done that.
Sure.
And so we were following along in the normal path that seemed to be the next steps for us and for the congregation. Everybody wanted that as well.
Sure.
And so there was a lot of probably disappointment that came as a result of that. I know I was a bit disappointed myself.
Yeah.
It felt like, okay, we had gotten to this place where, we had staff that were helping and everybody's gifts were being used. And I started the women's ministry. We had Circle of Friends going. I had, the Bible Believe It or Not. We had all the different kinds of classes and everything that was super fun to help people. And we did a lot of outreach, a lot.
Yes,
Even
we
when
did.
Duluth Fall Festival reminds me, because this past weekend was the festival,
Yep.
or weekend before last, I guess. And the neat thing about that is that we started the church in the park, and it's still going today.
Still going to this day.
So when they moved from Saturday to Saturday and Sunday for the event, they reached out to Pastor Jack and said, I know this is going to affect your congregation, so how do you feel about that? And
well, the good news is, they did ask me, and I was delighted to speak in the park, and to hopefully that people who've never heard the gospel would hear it and give their heart to Christ. And there were people that did give their heart to Christ, and some of those people I later married. And the good news is that tradition still goes on to this day of that park service, which is really pretty cool.
We were always involved in Duluth Fall Festival anyway, like even the artists that would bring their museum framed paintings into the building so that they wouldn't be out in the elements,
Yeah.
and then, protecting them. We hosted even the luncheons that they had, we hosted there. And so, no cost, and just really being involved in the city, which is what we're all about. We've always been about being involved and engaged wherever we happen to be.
Well, which is exactly what the church is about.
Exactly.
To be
It
involved
should
and
be.
engaged in the community.
There you go. And it's really a good thing that, God redirected us, like you said, in a different way. And not that any other direction is wrong. It's just that our redirection was something that means a lot to us. And so I wanted to tell this story today to
Awesome.
appreciate my favorite pastor.
Awesome. Thank you, Dave.
I remember one of the words when we were praying, and we actually went on our first and only sabbatical, that we ever took. It was like 4 weeks, actually, where we took 4 weeks off, and we went to several parts of the country and spent some time under some people that we trusted, shared what we were going through and asking for prayer. And really, God didn't use those people for giving us direction or anything. They were certainly supportive and kind and, generous with their time.
Yeah.
And certainly names that you would recognize if I mentioned them. But that's not as important as really what God did when we got back to the Atlanta airport. And we were like, okay, what was that all about? Because
I know.
here we are still
But it was an effort to at
seeking.
least try to get counsel, try to get advice, try to get input, so you just don't go off willy-nilly and do your own thing type of deal. Seeking, abundance. There's wisdom in the abundance of counselors, and so we submitted ourselves to those men and their wives, and hey, here's what we feel like the Lord's saying, and what do you guys think about it, and give us your feedback. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was what that time was really all about.
We spent a lot of time reading and praying,
Oh my goodness.
from hotel room to hotel room to hotel room to
Yeah.
hotel room,
Yeah.
because we did 4 different locations, pretty much one a week, and until we arrived back home. And I do want to mention, too, the people in our lives, like Pastor Dennis Kutzner and Larry Goodwin and Ralph Deal and Rod Buzzard, and those pastors who sowed into our lives all throughout our early marriage and early ministry, and the Calvary Ministries International. Our work with all of them has been priceless to us.
Well, those men and women are, frankly, foundation pillars in my life, and I am who I am because of them.
That's
I love
right.
them.
Well, we went to Calvary Bible College, and and we were part of Camp Calvary and doing all the crazy stuff we did out there, zip lining and taking our motorcycles up to camp, and for the teenagers, and it was super fun. So we definitely have a lot of seed here, there, and everywhere.
That's right.
And thank God for that, because it's all to His glory. And then when we got back to Atlanta, and the Lord spoke that one word to my heart, and I was like, don't say that I've ever heard God, speak clearly like that a couple times in my entire life. But the word was Anastasia, and I was like, I have no clue what that means. And I kind of Googled, well, it wasn't Google at the time. I'm not sure how I figured it out, but it ended up being in a baby book where I found the name. It's actually a name. And Anastasia is a girl's name of Greek origin, and it says it means resurrection. And the name is derived from the masculine Greek name Anastasios, which I'm not going to try to read all of this, but it does say could be an ideal choice for a baby's name who's born at Christmas or Easter. And when I read that,
That's cool.
It was powerful, because we had started on Easter Sunday, 1988. And so I love that. That it's globally recognized as a historical figure, known as the last daughter. That was kind of interesting. And then the other part that I really want to bring out, it says the baby Anastasia is set to bring a new dawn to your life. And again, that was something that the Lord was saying, okay, you're not going in this direction. You know, I've got something different. I've got something new. I'm doing this other thing. Behold, the Lord's doing a new thing, you know, like Scripture
Right.
talks about. So lots of prayer, 30 days from East Coast to West Coast to North and South for that sabbatical. And even what I would consider somewhat of a painful conclusion, the decision to follow God and not follow man, because I think it's hard to say, okay, guess what? We're not going to do what y'all thought we were going to do. And so
It was a very, very difficult decision to go that direction. And, you know, the leadership was 100% united on it. And when you, like with anything, when you do what's normally expected, it's accepted, you know, what a restaurant is. You know, it's normally, but if you open up something weird, you know, it's kind of like, well, that's not like a restaurant. You know, what are these people all about? You know, because we grow accustomed to, you know, architecture and climate and et cetera, et cetera. But when that changes, or if it does change drastically or dramatically from what we would consider the norm of, you know, what church even is, or what a restaurant is, or what you know, we divert from that to do something, you know, a little different. I mean, I'll use a food analogy. You know, I mean, back you don't remember back in the 70s and 80s, there wasn't like, you know, food trucks, and there weren't all these trendy chef-driven kind of restaurants around. Everybody was going to the mainline restaurants.
getting coffee from a diner and not a coffee shop.
Exactly. Like,
drive-through
what the
coffee.
heck is this about? These things, all of a sudden, and when they're moving into a new, you know, launching into that, and everybody is suspect of it, all of a sudden, then that thing now becomes the norm, and that continues to evolve. I mean, forgive me, but if you look at Starbucks, how Starbucks started, you know, it was kind of this little third place gathering out west, and people come in, know each other, hanging out, you know, and that was what it was about. That was really cool, and then that kind of took off, and forgive me for this, what I'm about to say next, but you know, now, you know,
we can cut it out. If
most of mainline coffee shops now is about, you know, how many can we get through the drive-through? It doesn't really matter whether we know anybody. You know, let's get in, get out. Their name is on the cup. Go in, get your cup. You know, instead of hang out. You know, that's changed. Now, what's interesting is those models are now changing back a little bit, because they realize this relational dynamic and being in community, well, is really super important. And so, you know, businesses kind of ebb and flow with this. At the end of the day, you know, and for me and my faith, I wanted, I wanted people to be in community together, to know one another, to be a part of one another's lives. That's how we live and grow, you know, better. And again, if we go back to the early church, if you go into the book of Acts, and you read how the early church was, and you research what their life was actually like, they actually kind of lived on top of one another. I don't know if you've ever been overseas, or you've been to Africa, or you look at Muslim communities. They kind of live on top of one another. Their houses are kind of integrated together, and they're living with and among themselves. And on one side, you think, well, I don't know if I like that. But on another side, it could really be deep and intimate and connected, and you're really learning and growing together, versus kind of occasionally seeing one another, bumping into one another on the street, and do this kind of let's catch up kind of a deal. And where that is authentic and real, you know, it can also really miss something in that relational dynamic. And so that's why we ended up moving the church to a direction of more of a 7-day-a-week, you know, type of ministry. We bought, you know, so we didn't stop. We never stopped doing ministry, by the way. I don't care what you're doing.
Everybody always says, you're back in ministry again? I'm like, when did we ever leave ministry? First of all, we're all in ministry if we're believing in
If you're
Jesus
a believer, you're
him.
in ministry. If you don't know you're in ministry, then you need to know you're in ministry. But you know, we did this 7-day-a-week, you know, thing with we had tennis courts, swimming pools, and cafes, all with the idea of trying to be involved and invest in that community, and give back to the community, and interact with the community. And the community was coming on that property. We saw thousands and thousands of people come on that community. You used to share your faith around the pool, as people had pool memberships, and the reason it happened is because it wasn't an event. It was living life and doing it together. You're a part of it. They're coming to the pool. Relational dynamics are happening versus we've carved out these 90 minutes where we're going to talk about this and invite people to is happening in rhythm of living life. And you were very effective at it. We saw a tremendous amount of growth during those days.
All right, so let me build a bridge between
Go right ahead.
where we've been, where CCF and the changes that we made, and you talking about swim tennis, because in 2006 basically was when the Lord called us from more of the big church building to a big church impact. And that's kind of the way I look at it, because from more of a Christian assembly to a Christ-centered action, integrated fellowship and community living, like you said, in and among. And there are, like I want to mention too, coffee shops like Whole Being Coffee Shop
Yes.
in Flowery Branch is an amazing example of a beautiful
Tremendous
coffee shop.
example.
And Kevin and Gail, owners of that, are amazing people. 5510 Main Street in Flowery Branch, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But so what we did after trying to figure out what we would do next is in praying about it, and somebody in the local community reached out to Jack and said, hey, I've got this 7-acre property here in Duluth, and you might just be crazy enough to do something with it. And we had always been about rebuilding and restoring, and from renting that Brownlee's furniture store to remodeling it, and then tearing down the Cricket Box factory and building the sanctuary there. Mm-hmm. And just staying involved in the town. And they wanted us to stay in Duluth. So they found this property, and we reached out to our leadership and all walked over there. And when we were on the property, I know that both you and I could see this place packed with people and local and those that are coming in from out of town, and just see activity on the courts and in the pool. And so we kind of got a vision for children's ministry that could be more camp-like. So I started our Healthy Kids camps and his kids camps for Sunday school or summer school and things like that. And then we remodeled everything pretty much from stem to stern.
Thousands of dollars on it.
And did a whole lot of things, just bootstrapped it. Basically, it's like we needed, this much money to resurface the pool, so we sold memberships dirt cheap just to get enough to resurface it. And then same things with the tennis courts, as well as borrowing money to finish the tennis courts and get them going with USTA tournaments being there almost every weekend, like 3 weekends a month. And so, like you said, just thousands of people coming across the property and just living life in and among, not trying to look at everybody as, I'm not hunting, I'm, for somebody who needs Jesus. I just was living my life, and you were living your life. And we had an opportunity because it had a gathering room. So Epic became Epic Family Life Center, and Epic Faith owning it and having that facility on that property and being able to use it. So remodel was complete, reputation was rebuilt. It had a bad reputation when we bought it. We restored that reputation. Ministry was rekindled there, and we kind of resurrected that place, gave it new life and a new name, and thousands of people passing through the doors and gates every weekend. So Epic Faith and the Epic Family Life Center was born. And it lived a very good, healthy life for many years.
Yes, it did.
Until the Lord said, okay, what's next? And God began to speak to us again. Or I say you, because I was like, okay, where are we going now? Oh no. And so episode 5, as it were, is from stationary to missionary, from integrated church to mobile church and micro church and food trucks. You mentioned it once before, the food truck analogy. After hearing Jack speak, actually, sharing his food truck analogy, there was a pastor who even wrote a book about it because they loved his analogies, and he's full of those. And it really helps bring meaning, just like Jesus. He taught in stories and parables, and my Jack does that same thing. That's why I always say you're my favorite pastor, favorite preacher. So instead of going to church, or the church going to church, we took the church to people, is really what that amounted to. and becoming the church with a more mobile aspect, and feeding people where they live, taking the food to the people who are hungry and thirsty for our Savior Jesus, and, taking care of them, and what I call feeding the sheep. So now tell us a little bit more about that, or whatever else you have on your list of things there.
Wow. Well, first of all, let me just say this as a big thought to wrap our head around. When it comes to the church, when we speak about the church, anybody who preaches on the Bible, that preaches Christ, if you're believing in Jesus Christ, who He is, the Son of God, and He gave His life for us, and our Father has the best of intentions for our life and is involved in our life, regardless of any label, denomination, or any of that stuff. What matters is the central theme of the gospel.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, He loves us. He gave His life for us. We live in a fallen world, and He came to redeem us. There you go. And so I'm never going to argue or have a bone to pick or an axe to grind against any certain kind of expression any more than I would with the food. I've traveled, you and I've traveled the world. Mm-hmm. And I can just tell you that the food in Africa is really different than the food here. And what they use as their main staple of food, is different. Are they wrong? No, of course they're not wrong. What are they trying to do? Feed and nourish people and stay alive.
Good.
And so, we tend to sometimes argue over the recipe or get hung up on the food product and not the result of the actual food. Mm-hmm. And this is where we can, in my view, go astray. So I don't have a dog in this fight. The only thing I care about is, are people coming to know Christ? So, I've told you this, I've told this story too many times, but when our church was considered a large church, it's interesting what people are focused on. Somebody stopped me in the foyer on a Sunday afternoon between services. Hey, Pastor, how many people should I say attend our church? It's an interesting question. You wonder, what's the motivation behind that? Or are you wanting to tell your friends that, hey, we're as successful as you, or what's this all about? And here's what came out of my mouth. I didn't say that, of course. But what I did say, I didn't have this teed up. It just came out of my mouth. Maybe it's something I read a few weeks before. I said, you tell them that 2 billion people attend our church. Tell them 2 billion. And he looked at me.
Are in our church.
Are in the church. Tell them 2 billion people are in our church. That's right. Tell them 2 billion people are in our church. And he looked at me very confused, like, man, that's creative math you've got right there. Mm-hmm. And he said, 2 billion? I said, yeah, here's why. At that time, I said, there are 6 billion people on the planet. I said, 2 billion of those people proclaim to follow Christ. Only they know, and only He knows whether they're following it. But the fact they proclaim it, I'm good with it, so I'm going to count the 2 billion. Mm-hmm. So you tell them 2 billion people attend our church because there's only one church. There's only one leader of the entire church. That's not Pastor Jack or Pastor Jim or Pastor Bob or Pastor so-and-so, even though it's Pastor Appreciation Day. We need to appreciate the shepherd of all shepherds, the shepherd of all sheep, and Jesus Himself.
The great shepherd.
He's the great shepherd. He's the one. In fact, the Bible tells us that He's the head. We're not the head. I'm not the head. We're just a part of the body. But He's the one driving this great thing called the church. And as the Apostle Paul said in the book of Philippians, because Paul was in prison, and people came and said, Jesus, I said, Paul, people are out here preaching the gospel with really wrong motives. And what did Paul say? I just thank God the gospel is being preached, because the word is the word.
Yeah.
And, to do on that. So anyhow, I got off on a little bunny trail there.
So when we were at Epic, actually, we had, that's okay. At Epic, we used to have the Sunday morning service,
Correct.
And the gathering that was there, and some of the tennis players would come in. Sometimes they would eat in the cafe because you cooked in the cafe. I used to tease that you fed the sheep, and you fed the sheep spiritually and physically. And so I was thinking about also when we moved to that facility and the disappointment that I mentioned earlier, and how some people weren't happy with all of that. And it's like, why would you do that? And there must be something wrong. And then there were like all these rumors and things.
Yeah.
It's like when you're trying to follow Jesus and do the best you can with your heart, that, sometimes it's not going to sit well with some people. And I just remember, the leadership team and everyone coming together, and when we made that decision as a group and we decided we weren't going to build on that property, and the integrity, since I'm talking about the CLEAN acronym, character means a lot to you and I.
It does.
And so when I think about, the character that you had was giving that money back to anybody who wanted it,
That's right.
who had contributed
Anybody.
to the property, just so that, they give to that property and that vision and that mission that we had basically sold them. This is what we're doing. And so with integrity and the highest of character in my mind, anybody who requested it got their money back from their donations. And that was costly. Making this change was costly for you and I, for sure. And some of
Absolutely.
those things that we went through, and I'm not saying that to toot our own horn, but I'm just saying character means something.
That's right.
And integrity and honesty and all of those things should be a part of every ministry, no matter what they're doing. And Epic continued to do what it was called to do. It fed people
Yeah.
and unique things. We had a great youth group. We met people from the community we would never have met.
That's right.
And been able to, pray with families that were going through struggles, not because they came to our church that we prayed for them. They were just a part
They
of
didn't
the
attend our church.
membership, didn't
Right.
attend our church at all,
That's
but
right.
they came for prayer, or they came to get married, or we did some funerals, and memorial services and things like that. The property was used for amazing things. I always like to tell about the special Olympics that we used to do with the tennis players that, from disabilities, physical and mental, emotional. Those are all great stories. So
Yep.
now let's get into a little bit more about where we are now, because even though we did say we have not, stopped ministry at all, we're definitely still doing ministry.
Still doing ministry.
Even though we've been bivocational. You have your general contractor's license, your licensed commercial realtor, and still a minister and a coach with ICF. So there's a lot of hats that you wear for us to try to cover all the bases.
If you listen to some previous podcasts, this will totally make sense.
Yes, you have to listen to the Jack of all trades and what do you want to be when you grow up. I guess that series around there. But we're not, we are semi-retired. He's 67, I'm 65, and I really want to retire, but I want to just retire into full-time ministry again, so I don't necessarily work some of the other stuff. But
I wrote something down about retirement, and I don't want to
Okay.
disappoint anybody out there, but there actually is no retirement in the Bible. There's not a verse that goes, and now you shall retire and sit back and enjoy whatever. There is no retirement in the Bible. In fact, and this might even be more disappointing. Well, I hope this doesn't disappoint you, but we all know that we're here for, depending on your faith. But here's my faith, that we are on this amazing planet that God made for us. We're here to do His work. That's why we're here, to do His work. Whatever we're doing, I don't care if you're working at Home Depot or a restaurant. If you're a believer, that's part of your work. But other part of your work, if you're a believer, is to help make more sheep, to share your faith, to see people come to Christ. And so there's no real mention of retirement in the Bible. I've read the Bible cover to cover, and I saw no real verse that said, "And now, when you turn this age, just kick back and sit on the front porch."
That's right.
And so.
there's no retirement.
There's no retirement. Here's the other thing. There's actually when you go to heaven, there's no retirement there either. Mm-hmm. The Bible doesn't say when you go to heaven, you're now going to sit around and listen to worship music forever.
The harps and the cloud.
That's not very compelling. Here's what it does say, though. It says we're going to rule and reign with Christ. If God is a creator, He's always going to be creating, and we don't have any idea what He has in mind, but this little planet we're on right now, Earth, is pretty impressive. I can only imagine what He's got up His sleeve, sorry, Lord, beyond this life. And we are going to be doing things, being active. I don't know what that all means, but He does. So anyhow, sorry,
So
I'm preaching now.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think one
Stop
of the
me.
things,
Stop
since
me.
I'm trying, you're not paying attention to my messages. No. So back to what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think,
What we're doing now.
because, it's like time to go again in a way. I mean, we've been going, but there's some new things happening. We joined a lot of things going on up on Lake Lanier, and and so we've been pretty much enjoying fellowship and friendship with people up there. We also are bringing a message to the lake. I do a Lake Ladies Bible study. We want to eventually do Epic on the Lake, but we're really trying to lean into wherever God opens a door for studying the Bible. And I think the Bible is the key to all of our health and wellness. And when we're talking about healthy living revolution, like our shirts say, that's really what it's all about. It's the overall, because it's really, I focus a lot on my own health or our own health whenever I do my podcast, and really leaning into our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, and of course our spiritual health. But we've got to remember that there's so much going on around us all the time, and we certainly are experiencing a lot of things right now. We're not going to mention a lot of that, but what we are talking about is the fact that we've got to care about our own health, our own mission, and also about the world around us and those people who actually need more stability in their life or more peace, like some of the things that we've found that work for our marriage or work for our business. A lot of them are very much the same things. And so when we talk about the things that we're starting now, like you've got a podcast, and I know that one of the things I wanted you to share is about the Beyond the Shire with Jack Wolfe. And again, I'm a podcaster that's telling you to listen to somebody else's podcast, and that's because we're all in this together. There's all kinds of great messages out there. So tell us about Beyond the Shire. What does that mean, and where did that name come from?
Well, Beyond the Shire. Yes, you should listen to the podcast. Stephanie's consistent week after week after week. I'm consistent in a different way.
You're consistently
from time to time. But go back to the very beginning, Beyond the Shire, start listening to. I do leadership stuff, but then I transition to do a lot of stuff around faith, around the Bible that are relational and dynamic. Beyond the Shire came from the movie The Hobbit, and it really is a great. If you ever watch The Hobbit, you'll watch this great interaction between Gandalf and Bilbo, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful story how Gandalf appears to Bilbo, and when he appears to Bilbo, Bilbo's coming out of the house, and he's got his pipe. He's going out to get the mail, and Gandalf is standing there in front of Bilbo, and he says to Bilbo, "I'm going to tell the others." That you're coming, type of deal. Like, what coming, going, where, I'm not going anywhere, type of thing. And they start to have this conversation. And Bilbo says to Gandalf, Gandalf, who are you? He says, I'm Gandalf when I'm Gandalf. And he goes, the Wandering Wizard, this is it. I remember watching your fireworks show on this summer's eve kind of a thing, and I didn't know, he says this, I didn't know you were still around. Kind of a deal. He says it like that. That's the exact word. And Gandalf goes, well, where else would I be? Now, it's interesting. A lot of people who are not believers don't know that this is actually a Christian metaphorical film, written by Tolkien, who was a believer. And so they're having this conversation, Gandalf and Bilbo, and then he's trying to get Bilbo to step into this adventure. And Bilbo goes, oh, no, I'm not interested in any kind of adventure. No, I can't imagine anyone west of Bree would even want to go on an adventure. And so Bilbo goes about his business. He's kind of muttering to himself and talking about how adventures are nasty and disturbing and uncomfortable. And then this happens right here. This will preach. And I've preached it. But then Bilbo, he gets Bilbo's attention because Gandalf says, he mentioned him by another name. And when he mentioned him by another name, it got Bilbo's attention. And we have kind of a spiritual name, and where God kind of calls us. And he was like amazed that he remembered this, and it kind of awakened Bilbo to his heritage and to his, if you will, faith. And it's interesting because then he finally tells Bilbo, all right, I'll tell the others that I'm coming, that you're coming along. And then it cuts to another scene where they're inside Bilbo's house, and Bilbo they have these pictures of kind of his family heritage, kind of like Hebrews talks about the faith of Moses, and think about it in that way, right? And he asked Gandalf, he said, well, if I go, will I come back? And, Gandalf did not say, oh, yeah, absolutely. But he says, if you do come back, you will never be the same.
And that story resonates with my heart so much about people of faith. Forgive me, but we don't want to go on an adventure. We're not really interested in getting, I shouldn't say that categorically. We struggle sometimes to be as engaged as we actually were. And just so I can wear this metaphor out, I think it's really great that metaphorically in the story, when you look at Bilbo, they're kind of these odd creatures with big feet. They're short, squatty. They're hobbits, for crying out loud. And I think Tolkien did a great job, because a lot of times when we think about people of faith, we think of, these giants, these Samson type of people, but it's ordinary, everyday. I'm going to use the word ordinary because actually everybody's ordinary. Tom, what's that? The quarterback you like? Tom
Brady.
Thank you. Tom Brady. Sorry, Tom. Sorry if you get this podcast.
Anymore.
Tom Brady. He's actually
new
everybody's ordinary, if you will. We're all made of the same thing, and
exactly.
so to kind of drill down on the point that we don't have to be a superstar to be used, but just God wants to use everyday people, ordinary people. And Bilbo goes on this adventure, and it's an extraordinary movie.
And he gets stronger and stronger. The things he was very selfish or self-confident or had a lack of self-confidence, and and then he grew in his confidence and started to feel a part of the mission and stuff, and that's what Beyond the Shire is all about. And we also started something else just here before we close. Is the adult Bible community, and we started that at Whole Being in Flowery Branch at the Whole Being Cafe, which is amazing. They've got a beautiful upper room, and so with couches and chairs and tables, and it's just a fun experience actually to go there on Sunday evenings at 5. And so our goal is just really to read the Word, question things, ask things, learn things, grow in our faith using just the Bible. So it's just the Word of God and our ability to just share in each other's lives, pray for one another. And it's adults, so grab a babysitter and take care of your kids, and maybe it's a date night. But those are just some of the things. This weekend, I've got my Leading Ladies reunion, so I've got almost 20 women coming to the house, which is going to be fun and exciting. Thank you for being able to cook for us, Jack, and serve us. I appreciate that very much. And so, just in closing, do you have a final thought that you want to leave with someone?
The adult Bible community is really about how to understand the Bible as a current word for today. This is how do we read it for October the 12th, 2023. How can we read it and get the understanding of how do we live our life right now and what's going on in the news, what's going on in our world. And the Bible actually helps us understand this, and we're digging into it in that way. It will make an impact in your lives. It's not just about me speaking, it's about all of us working and growing together.
Amen. Well, thank you for that. All right, so today we are celebrating pastors, and especially you pastors' wives even. I'm going to give a shout out to you because you're often the unsung heroes, behind the scenes creators and laborers, leading from the middle of the pack. So I appreciate all of you, and I'm excited that Jack Wolfe was here with us today. Jack at My Epic Faith, if you want more information about the adult Bible community or about Epic Faith in general, myepicfaith.org. So you've been listening to Work Well with Stephanie Wolfe, brought to you by the Whole Food Health Coach LLC, where we make your goals our goals and you're never alone on your wellness journey. And Dr. Catherine Wegman of the Direct Primary Care Clinic in Swanee, Georgia. So any tests, she can do all kinds of things. She's been my primary care physician for the last 2 years in this membership capacity. You can go to gamddirect.com to see this amazing membership and see if it works for you. So as always, for more information on the Whole Food Health Coach or our corporate wellness programs, virtual classes, or individual coaching programs, go to wholefoodhealthcoach.com. Our coaching is available virtually anywhere in the country. I'm Stephanie Wolfe, wishing you well personally and professionally. See you next time live or on your favorite podcast channel. Until then, choose life.